Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kevin Lee Social. Thank you for tuning in. What initially began as an 8-part series interviewing entrepreneurs to share and inspire how they've successfully pivoted during COVID-19, I have decided not only to continue this series, but also to expand on the scope to understand and learn about people's craft, philosophy, the challenges they face in the industry, and their favorite failures that have helped shape them to become who they are today. By going deeper and understanding different thought leaders, businesses, and industries, the idea is to help cross-pollinate ideas applicable in your life and inspire action in this new norm we live in. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Before we get on with the show, today's podcast is sponsored by Altitude Tea. Altitude Tea specializes in rare and exotic teas you can't find on supermarket shelves. Teas grown on high altitudes are more nutrient-dense due to the cold nights and misty peaks that slows the growth of the tea plant, leading to a higher concentration of aromatic oils and richer flavors. They are located in Waterloo and they do private tea ceremonies where you can learn how to drink tea mindfully using a traditional gongfu set and have over 20 varieties of tea to choose from. For our listeners, you can use the code BEYOND at checkout for 15% off. Today we have August Rosedale. He is an inventor, entrepreneur, musician, and student based in San Francisco. He is the co-founder of a startup builder, OmniLaunch, the owner of Mirage Gallery, and a creator of AI-generated artists, Alejandro and Taylor. His collection of 920 pieces sold in 5 minutes. Including secondary sales, it has now reached over $1.5 million in volume since the beginning of September. Everyone, please help me welcome August. Hey August, thanks for coming on today. How are you doing?
Pretty good, yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I first heard you on the Kevin Rose podcast, as I mentioned, and I was hooked. And I thought, I've got to get this guy on my podcast. And,
I know that was a fun one. It definitely helped a lot of people see the project, and yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. It's starting about the project. I wanted to start with a background journey of what you're currently studying and then going deep into the NFT, AI, machine learning, art world. And how did you get started with all of it?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in college. I'm a senior. I go to school in Santa Clara, California, studying mechanical engineering. Yeah, so I'll be done in June, and pretty much during COVID, I was just at home all the time. So I just had all this time, and I started just playing with like different sorts of open sourced AI tech. And I was starting with doing stuff with deep fakes. And I was like, wow, like the tech here is insane. But then I was like, which I tell people every time, like when I was doing deep fakes, I was like, okay, I don't know how to actually like do good with this. It's like the tech is just like scary. You're just like, this could just be applied in so many bad circumstances compared to good. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick with doing like new and cool like AI sort of tech, but I'm gonna do something that's not deepfakes. So then I started doing AI art, and that was how the whole Mirage Gallery project started. And this started back in December of 2020. It's been a bit now.
So it was quite a recent project in terms of about a year now, actually. Almost.
Yeah.
And you did all of that while studying mechanical engineering, which is crazy, buddy. I did mech engineering back here, and it was an extremely tough degree.
Yeah, it's definitely heavy. It's just the funny thing is like when I decided to do it, I've always loved building like physical things and doing stuff with electronics, but then wanting to build machines and stuff like this. So I was like, I'll do mech because that's perfect. But then after you start doing mech, as you find out that the vast majority of the stuff you are doing hands-on building, like thermodynamics, like just all these sorts of just math and science classes, and you soon figure out, oh, this is actually quite hard.
Tell me about it. It was so math heavy.
Yeah, exactly.
And to continue along with what you introduced us with, Mirage Gallery, with your AI machine learning art, I looked it up. I checked out the website, and man, it's what an incredible project. Instead of me walking through it, can you walk the audience through what it is all about?
Sure. Yeah. So when I first started this back in December, I saw people doing stuff with AI art, but I was thinking it through and I was like, okay, this is super cool. But then I was like, okay, if I'm trying to sell this or something, I was like, it feels like when you buy a piece of art, a big part of it is the artist. And a big part of it is having a story behind a piece of art. And that adds value to the piece. And that if the artist has a super awesome story and you know them, it might make you more inclined to support them and buy their art compared to just looking at the piece of art itself. So I was thinking about that. So I had the thought, okay, everyone's doing this stuff, or not everyone, but everyone who's doing stuff with art. I felt like there was a big chunk that was not there with there's no artist, it's just art. And you can just pretty much produce tons of this stuff with these AI models that can just output an infinite number of pieces of art. So my first thought was, okay, not only do I want to create AI art, but I want to create AI artists that create their own art. So then it kind of puts those two ideas together. And then me and my friend had pretty early access to GPT-3 from OpenAI, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's pretty much just it's this huge AI model that OpenAI trained. It's a natural language processor, so it's only text. So you can pretty much just talk to it or have it write things for you, stuff like that. It's phenomenal. It's super powerful. So with that, and then with art, I was like, okay, that's a start for creating more of a backstory, because with GPT-3, you could create a story for each art piece, and you could create the names of the art pieces and a story for the artist. That can all come from GPT-3. And then I saw a site called This Person Does Not Exist.com. And it was pretty much these AI created faces. And when you look at these faces, you're just like, these look like pictures of people. You're like, this is just a picture of someone. But then you look into it and you're like, this is insane, because they're not pictures, even though they look like they are, they're actually fake people. So I was like, okay, now if you put all those three things together, right? You have the art, you have the faces, then you have this text model from OpenAI that can create stories and biographies, could answer interview questions, so on. That can create cohesive artists that can create art. And so I went with that. And so I pretty much was practicing training my own models for creating the faces. So I was training on these big data sets of human faces, outputting faces, doing the same thing, but training on art and photographs and anything I chose to put in these data sets to create the art, and then GPT-3 for anything that's text. And when I was first doing this was before I knew anything about NFTs. So my first plan was I was just hoping to be selling physical canvas prints, because I was doing testing with having these art pieces, then doing AI upsizing tools, and then getting those printed on canvas. And I was definitely having success just with like how those pieces looked. I was like, this is awesome. This is something new. And there can be this story behind it. And then that's how I then found out about the NFT space after that. But that was how it all started, the whole project.
Wow, that's what an incredible journey.
Yeah.
It's a lot for people to digest and to understand what's going on. It's funny because I've recently did a course called Generative Art and Computational Creativity. And it walked me through a bit of the history of generative art and what was going on. And your project reminds me of a few different items that was in that course. And one of the part was, I think it was in either the 50s or the 60s, one of the early days of generative art. And there was this artist called Aaron, which was computer generated. And so
Right.
Aaron is not human. Aaron is an algorithm, an AI essentially. And Aaron would create these first pieces of art, and then they would frame it, and it's sold for a ridiculous amount because it was one of the
I'm
first,
sure. Yeah.
computer generated art pieces that was not human. And so that's one element that you've taken to another level. And then there's another element where they were showing us about bots and how essentially you're connecting. People can start having conversation with these bots, but it was very basic examples, and you could tell that you were talking to a computer because eventually, it didn't make sense. But how crazy is GPT-3? It's
very crazy.
it's scary, crazy.
Yes.
And then you combine that element as well, and you've taken that to another level with the advance of GPT-3. I loved how you really considered deeply into the project of defining yourself and making it different, especially like you said, a piece of art, and people value the person behind it. And you've created this unique story, a unique face. I looked on the website. Anyone who's listening, go check out the Mirage Gallery website. It's the artists, the AI artists themselves. They look like a person that you see on the street. Seriously, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's been times where some friend of mine, like from high school or something, will be like, "Oh, like, what's the project that you're doing?" And I actually think this happened with my grandma also. She was like, "Oh, what's the project you're doing? The stuff with art and AI." So I send her the site, and then she texts me back. She said, "Oh, okay, this is cool. So like, how did you meet Alejandro and Taylor? Like what, like where, like how do they fit in this? Who are they?" And I was like, no, they're the AI artists. They're just like,
mind blown, especially for grandma. I think that her reaction would have been priceless.
Yeah, exactly.
What? AI artists? Who? What? They're not real?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, what was your goal with the art that you were creating? And what did you really want people to take away from it?
I think when I started the project, I just wanted to do something that felt new and that I hadn't seen people doing, and also was a really great topic of conversation, because there's a lot of questions that can come up with AI art and AI artists, a lot of questions with ethics and stuff like this. And people often have been like, "Oh, is this going to take jobs from artists and stuff?" And I don't think so. I have plenty of things that I have thought through on my thoughts on that, because I always, when I started the project, I was like, I want to do something that stands out and is something new, but not anything that I feel like is bad. That's why I stopped doing deepfakes at the beginning, because I was like, this is just bad. This is bad. I've got to do something different. But so I think those were the main first things that I was doing. And then I stayed on the path of trying to do things that are new and that I haven't seen people do. And I'm sure we'll talk about it in a bit. But when I got more into NFTs and then doing this crypto native project, was doing that same thing of just trying to do something different.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I can imagine launching such a project of that scale. It was a lot to do, let alone you were studying at this time as well. I can imagine that it wasn't all smooth sailing. Could you share with us a story, if anything happened during the whole process?
Yeah, sure. There was plenty of times at the beginning where I was definitely like, "Oh, this is not catching on. This isn't happening." Because when I first, or the funny thing is, people always thought it was cool. And I never doubted that it was a cool idea, but I was definitely like, are people actually going to buy these, or are they just going to see it and say that's cool? Because there's like a whole different thing. It's like, it's one thing to think it's cool, then it's a second thing to actually pay for it. So at the beginning, I actually did this event super early on. I think it must have been in January or something. I met someone named Angela Dalton. She saw one of my LinkedIn posts because a mutual connection shared it or something. And she was doing this virtual event in crypto voxels and decentraland, which are these decentralized virtual spaces. And she was planning on doing this event with ARK Invest. And she contacted me, and we pretty much ended up talking about if I wanted my artist to be a part of this event for their first sales, because this was back, like I was saying, must have been January when me and her were first talking about it. And it was definitely like I hadn't sold anything. I was talking it. Ark Invest is big. So I was like, this is awesome. This is like such a score. And I pretty much then proceeded to be quite hands-on, pretty much just like helping Angela to organize the event and working with Ark Invest and getting everything set up, and then getting other speakers. And pretty much the idea was that I was gonna speak at this event also after Kathy from Ark Invest, and there are a bunch of other speakers and a bunch of OG like crypto artists. Like I don't know if you like Josie Bellini, and a lot of money, a ton of these just like people who have been in NFTs for a long time. And I was okay, this could be it. This could be a good time to do the first sale of the first sales. And we did this event, and this event happened in May. So there was a lot of planning. This event took a long time until it actually happened in May. I was like, okay, first auctions, right? And the auctions go, and it was just minimal traction with just people bidding on the auction. So I was definitely disappointed, because I was really thinking this is like a prime event to have this happen. And the fact that only maybe 5 or so out of 40 pieces had any bids on them for the auctions, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I have to do something different here. I have to do something different. I thought this event would be like a prime. People there would be the people who might be interested in the project. So that was definitely hard, I think, after that event. But I never was discouraged from the project. I definitely felt like stressed about, okay, maybe I need to do something differently. But I definitely was always like, I'm sticking with this because I think this is a cool project, and everyone I talk to thinks it's a cool project. I just need to find out like what angle to take to have it be something that could actually become a potential like source of income, so I can keep doing it. My goal forever has been to get something going before I graduate college, so that I don't have to get a traditional job out of college. That's been my that also was my goal in high school, to do it so I don't have to go to college. So then I, of course, did not make a bunch of money in high school, so I proceeded to go to college. But then my new goal was, okay, now I have to get something started, can just keep doing it after college and not have to apply and get a job. I've always just done my own thing, and I was like, I want to continue doing my own thing. And even though I have this mechanical engineering degree, I don't want to just be an engineer at a company. I want to be doing my own thing, and maybe at some point I'll do something where we're building or designing something physical, and then my degree can help out and add credibility and all of that. But there were definitely times, back to the question, there were definitely times when I had to think about what I wanted to do differently, for how I wanted to, or which angle I wanted to take to try to figure out how to get this project to get some traction. And that, once I was deeper in the NFT space, that was when I was thinking again, okay, how do I do something different? Like we were talking about earlier, that was what I was coming up with when I created the artist, was to do something different. Then I was in the NFT space, and I was like, well, if you're doing stuff with this cool blockchain tech and it's digital, I was like, okay, we have to do something that takes advantage of the tech that you couldn't do in the traditional art sense. And there's a company called Async Art, and Async Art definitely inspired me because async art creates these dynamic NFTs. And what that means is different people own different layers of one piece. Those different people can change what their layer, which like state it's in, and that'll all reflect onto the main piece. And somebody can own that main piece and it'll update when those other people switch their pieces. And I saw that, I was like, okay, now that is taking advantage of the tech. That's doing something that would not be very practical to do. You're not going to have a physical painting that can do that because it's a painting, can't do that. And I had this thought like, okay, with my first AI artists, the ones that I created, all which their names are Alejandro and Taylor, I was like, okay, there. When I first came up with them, it was before I was in the NFT space. I wasn't thinking about having to be dynamic because, like I was saying, I was planning on selling physical prints. So then I was like, okay, maybe that's why it's not picking up the way I'm hoping it would, because it's not something that's like different enough. So that's when I came up with the next project idea through Mirage Gallery, which is called Crypto Native. And the idea with that was just having AI art pieces. So I took a bit out with doing the artists and I was just doing AI art. The idea is supposed to be like there's these different styles, and the main idea was that the pieces actually, when secondary sales happen, that meet certain requirements. And evolving means the model is trained for a longer period of time and then outputs the same piece, and it'll end up looking like the same piece, but it'll be different and it'll be evolved. So that was how I decided to start with that project. And it just with, again, trying to do something, taking advantage of the tech with this, like doing something dynamic and then doing something I hadn't seen done, which was evolving AI art that is evolving based on secondary sales.
Gotcha. So to reiterate what you were saying was that, so with you're combining still what you've learned with the Mirage Gallery project, but you're taking it to a different level by using a blockchain technology, and through secondary sales, each time someone purchases it that hits a certain cap of money purchase, the artwork would evolve for that person.
Yes, exactly. And the whole idea with having the requirements for the sale wasn't as sometimes it will seem, oh, it's just a way for me to try to make more money because with NFTs, you can get a cut of secondary sales. But the main purpose that I actually came up with while wanting to set a sale requirement and an increased price requirement was to not allow people to really easily just game this system. For example, if I evolved the piece just when a transfer happened, let's say each of these pieces, which is how I have it, they each have 10 phases. Let's say there was no sale requirement and it was just per transfer. Somebody could just make a second wallet and transfer back and forth between themselves 10 times, then get it to phase 10. So I was like, okay, I want it to be like not that easy to do that.
Right.
So I want it to be like more feel authentic. So I was like, okay, I've got to set a price, and I got to set a price that needs to be increased by. Then I was like, okay, if I just say the price needs to be 20% higher, someone could still do the first sale to themselves as 0.00002 and then do 20% higher, which would be like still pretty much free. So I was like, okay, so now I'm going to do one other thing, which is set a minimum price and then set from that price, it needs to be 20% higher. And that was the idea and people have still sold them and bought them from themselves. And which is, I'm like, there's no, I knew after thinking it through, there's no way that I could come up with to stop that from happening because of that's how blockchain is. You can't stop someone from creating a new address. So I was like, okay, if they're going to do it, that's fine. But there are going to be losing 12.5% of that every time because 10% would go back to Mirage Gallery and then 2.5% would be going to OpenSea as the fee that OpenSea takes on all sales. So That was what I was thinking through to make it's you can still sell it to yourself, but it still will cost you to do it. And I was hoping that people will mainly not do that and just actually have it be authentic buying and selling between people.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to add value to the end person. I love the way you think. You're always looking for ways to utilize technology that hasn't been used before, from
Yep.
AI to GPT-3 to the way that you look at art to utilizing this blockchain space, the whole NFT space. Because exactly, it's not something like that you could not do before, and without the NFT space, like you said, with the physical print, like when it gets sold, it does nothing. It's a physical,
Exactly.
it doesn't morph. It cannot
Yeah.
morph. But with this model, yes, and we'll get into a bit of details how you try it out later.
Yeah.
And and how is that all going for you with Mirage Galley and Crypto Native? How is that all selling for you?
Yes, pretty much crypto native. The way that I did it was quite different from how I was doing Alejandro and Taylor. Alejandro and Taylor, the idea was each of them will only ever create 100 pieces, and they'll be selling those in collections of 20. So that's why, like I said, the first sale I did was 40 because it was 20 per artist. So then I was seeing people, once I was getting into the space, I was seeing this other style that people were doing where they're doing these big drops for cheaper price per piece, and they're letting people mint the NFT straight off the contract. Instead of what I was doing with Alejandro and Taylor, is I would mint the images or the NFTs to myself, and then I'd be selling them from my address, which there's different pros and cons to each strategy. With crypto native, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a different approach and let people mint the pieces straight from the contract, which also adds in this like game aspect of you don't know what piece you're going to get until you buy it. Pretty much the idea was crypto native would be 1,000. There will only ever be 1,000 pieces total, which compared to a lot of the collectible project in the space, 1,000 is still quite small. It's the standard when people do these 10,000 projects. And since the beginning, I've been like, I don't love that. I don't love the 10,000 thing. I think it's fine for a collectible, like it's like with all these PFP projects. But I was like, for art, like this, like the stuff I'm doing, even though I could have it output 10,000, I was like, I want it to be lower quantity. So obviously, Alejandro and Taylor take that further and say only 100 per, right, for each of them. But then with Cryptonative, I was like, okay, I'll do 1,000. And the way I was going to do it is the first 50 pieces I was going to airdrop, so send to people who I have met in the space. So I contacted a ton of people who I met in the space through Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces, or I met them on Twitter. Pretty much all people who have bigger followings than me or have been early and supportive of the project.
Mm-hmm.
And I pretty much contact them and like, hey, I'm doing this project, AI evolving stuff. Do you want to get in on the airdrop? I'll send you 1 or 2 pieces for free. And if they like the project, they'll respond and say, yeah. So then I'm doing these like consensual airdrops because people often will just airdrop people stuff without asking them. And often people don't like that. So I pretty much talked to all these people, got all these people with bigger followings than me to want to be a part of this airdrop that I was doing of the first 50 pieces. And I was just hoping that I could airdrop them and then maybe some of them would share it out and see, look, I got this cool airdrop, and that could help promote the project because I don't have a huge Twitter following. My Twitter following now still isn't that big, but it's actually still a lot bigger than what I had when this project was starting currently. So it was quite small. So I pretty much with that, I then was like, okay, so I'm going to airdrop the first 50. I'm going to save 10 for myself, and I'm going to save these 10 to do a special auction that's going to be partnered with OpenSea because I was able to get in touch with OpenSea. So I was like, okay, we'll do these 10 primary sale through OpenSea and do a cool auction of just those 10. And then the other 900, so there's 1,000 total. So that means there's 920 that I was going to mint, and there's going to be 20 at the end that I was going to save to allow people to boat on in the future and choose those last 20. And that actually hasn't even happened yet. But so there were 920 that I was going to let people mint. And I was pretty much started promoting, making fun videos that show like the different phases, show the idea, okay, these pieces evolve. And it was funny because I was doing all this promoting, right? It was like getting some traction. I would share with the airdrop group, and they would often share it out, the people who are going to be in the airdrop group, which was super helpful because, like I said, a ton of them have bigger followings than me. But then I was going to do the first mint for those 920 of the project. I was planning on doing that on, I believe it was August 30th. So not that long ago. And I was going to do the airdrop, I was actually going to send out the airdrop 2 days before that. And my plan was to send the airdrop Saturday night because the mint was going to open on a Monday. So I stayed up till 1 a.m. Saturday night. Then I did the airdrop because I did that in order to save gas because I had to deploy my contract. And then I had to send out these 50 pieces. And it ended up costing like $1,000 to $2,000 in gas just to do that. Thankfully, Alejandro and Taylor before then had brought in about 4 or 5 Ethereum, which was like huge that they even made that much. But I was able, so I had money there to help with funding the gas of deploying this big contract and then sending out all these airdrops because you have to send them out individually. So you have to pay gas. Every one that I sent out to someone I had to pay for. So and then the craziest thing happened, which was after I do this airdrop, Alejandro and Taylor, keep in mind, all of their pieces were set for sale at 0.25. It was expensive, but they're all at 0.25. They still had 22 pieces left that hadn't sold since their auction opened in May. So it had been 3 or 4 months and they hadn't sold even over 50% of their pieces. I do this airdrop. It's like Saturday night, like 2 a.m. by the time I'm done. And then like in a matter of 5 or 10 minutes, all of Alejandro and Taylor's remaining 22 pieces just get bought by 10 different people. And I'm just sitting there like we just brought in 5 Ethereum. And I was like, this is crazy. I was like, wow, that easily paid for the gas. So I was like, this is crazy. That's so weird. Like it shows that people are excited about the crypto native project because they're saying, oh, this project hasn't actually opened yet, but this is a earlier project from the same Mirage gallery. So I was like, okay, that gives me hope that people are definitely excited. And then the next day was Sunday and people started DMing me, not a ton, but just a few people DM me, hey, so what time is the mint opening tomorrow? And I was like, 9 a.m. They're like, okay, I'm really stressing that I'm not going to get a piece. And I was like, no. Like there's going to be 920. Like you'll be able to get one. And I'm like, the sale price was 0.025 for every piece. So it's way cheaper than the Alejandro Taylor ones because they're 920. I was like, oh no, you'll be able to get a piece. There's 920. It's not gonna be like that crazy. And my plan was that I'll leave minting open for 3 days. And after 3 days, I will close the minting with this function I made in the contract that will not allow anyone else to mint. And the idea, the fun part, I was like, okay, this will like get people to want to make sure like Wednesday night when it closes, maybe some final ones will come in before I shut it forever and no one can get those unminted pieces. Right. So then Monday morning comes, right, and I open up the contract I open up minting 5 minutes before 9 so I could get ready to send out my emails promoting it and tweet it. And I open the thing and then I see like a bunch of transactions come on the contract. And then I think by 9:04, all gone, all minted. Whoa. 20. So I'm just sitting here, right? Just wow, that was insane because obviously it brought in a bunch of money. So I was like, this is like crazy. But I was also just like in shock that people were like that supportive of the project that it was just like, boom, all gone. So that was super fun. And then the scary thing that happened was that there was this bug that happened with the metadata. So an NFT is just a token on chain that will often point to a URL that'll be the metadata, and the metadata will have the attributes and the image link and all of that. Sometimes that'll be hosted centrally and sometimes decentrally. It's just some of the technical details, but there was a issue with our metadata, and 400 of the minted tokens, I believe, were the metadata links were dead, so they were not showing up. So right, so I'm like freaking out here because we just brought in all this money and they all sold, and 400 of these can't be seen. They have people have the token, but they go to look at the token and it's nothing. There's no art, nothing. So then, or me and my friend Lucas, who was helping me, Lucas, my friend, he helped out with for having the pieces evolve when secondary sales happen. And we're doing that with the OpenSea API. And it's actually, we open sourced all of the code for that. So anyone who wants to do evolving NFTs with the OpenSea API can go and get Lucas's code and just do it for free. So that was our way of giving back, because we've done a lot of stuff with other people's open source code, like with these AI models. So it was fun to be able to give back and be like, okay, now we made something and we're gonna open source it.
That's awesome.
So Lucas and I pretty much get on a call because he normally lives near here, but he was with his family near LA. So we get on the call and I'm like, dude, they're not all there. Like, what's going on? And we're looking at it and we start realizing like what's going on. And we like made too many. It was confusing, but we then pretty much sit down. So all the pieces sold, I think by 9:10 a.m. And I think we sit down at 9:30 a.m. I'm on Zoom here with him, and we start working like, okay, we're just gonna get this fixed, get everyone's pieces fixed, so everyone's happy. And little did we know how much of a struggle this would be, because also as this is happening, some people's pieces are fine, and those people are selling them to try to get the pieces to evolve. And those are successfully evolving. So we're like, okay, good. Some of this is going good. But so now we're trying to fix these pieces, but we can't just reset our database because people are selling their pieces. So I'm like, if somebody bought a piece and then we reset the database after they bought it on the secondary market, that's bad, because then that means their piece is going to change, and they bought it on the secondary market, meaning they saw it when they bought it, compared to people who randomly got a piece. I was like, if their piece has to change, not the end of the world, because they didn't choose it to begin with. But anyone who bought a secondary piece, I was like, secondary market piece, I was like, we cannot change their pieces. I just would feel bad.
Right.
So we then sit down and we work on this for 26, 27 hours straight. And it was brutal, and it was such a pain. We pretty much had it fixed. I think after 27 hours, there were like 40 pieces that were not fixed. And I was at the point, like, I will go through and fix those 40 by hand. Like, this is crazy, because we're trying to pretty much find an efficient way to edit the metadata of all the files, but not the ones that have had sales, and to add, it was just, I could explain it, but it's just like painful to even explain. But so after 27, so I was sitting here from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. the next day. And we took a half-hour break at some point during the night. And it was, I sit in this chair and work hard a ton, but I've never done something like that. That was something else. But we then pretty much have it fixed. I go home to my family. So I was planning on going home. I drive home the next day after not sleeping, get home. I think I went to sleep at 8 p.m. that night after not sleeping the whole night before. And I have talked to Lucas about it. I was like, I don't think I've ever slept so happily. Like, and then the next 2 days after that, we fixed all the final little touches and got everything fixed. So now everything's perfect. The pieces evolve. Everyone has their piece. Everyone can see their piece. And we've now had about 280 Ethereum trade volume on the crypto native collection. So obviously, Ethereum in the last few days has been going down. But yeah, it's even with that, I think it's about $1.2 million in secondary sale volume, which is crazy. And then that also has helped Alejandro and Taylor get more sales. I did their second drop because, like I said, after the airdrop, their first one all sold out.
Mm.
And I did their second drop with 20 pieces for each of them. And that was when I felt very happy and felt like it came full circle because I did their second drop and I did this declining auction, and between about zero point 0.4 ETH and 0.25, when it was going down over the course of a couple hours, all 40 pieces sold between there. So it was just like, wow, like I went from taking 4 months to selling 40 pieces and only having them sell because of the anticipation for this new project I'm doing, to having over the course of a couple hours, all of them sell for between 0.4 and 0.25 as it was going down. They just started like all going. And it was just very okay, like it's getting traction and the projects are complementing each other and helping each other. Some people like the super smaller scale Alejandro Taylor ones, and some people like the bigger scale evolving aspect that crypto native has. And I have a new project that I'm doing in the future, but that's pretty much the whole crypto native story, and it's a fun one.
Betty, first of all, massive congratulations on the success of the release of Alejandro and Taylor's series, as well as Crypto Native. That's an incredible story. There was so many moving pieces, but at the end of the day, all your hard work paid off.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that I could only imagine the amount of stress that you guys went through.
I know, and so it's nice to hear people say like hard work pays off. Is there's so many people, like a lot of my friends who I've known from high school, after that they heard that happened, because people are like, oh, like August did this sale, like brought in some money, and people are like, oh, like you made all that money in 10 minutes. And I'm just like, sure, you can phrase it like that. Yes, technically, yes. But I've been doing this project, like I've been working so hard. And of course, yeah, for when that sellout happened, it came in quickly, but I was like, it didn't feel like I just did something and just made all that money. It's, no, I've been doing this for a while. It's definitely fun to have been working on something and have it finally just get like big traction like that, and then continue to have this huge traction on the secondary markets, and then keep being able to keep. That's the cool thing with NFTs, is being able to get a cut of that and like being able to put that back into projects. And I've given away now like $20,000, I think, or so. So it's been huge, and I've been buying other people's art, and I bought someone's art who's not even in the NFT space, bought a big painting by this guy, and it's been fun to give back a bunch of money, buy a bunch of people's art who aren't having a ton of traction, but I actually think their art is super cool. I've always been like, if you like the piece of art, then you should buy it. You shouldn't be thinking about like people who do art just as an investment. I'm just like, that's just boring. It's just, yeah, it would be cool if it goes up in value and maybe you can like sell it for 10x or something. But if you don't like the piece, then just don't buy it. That's what I've always felt like. For the people who buy my stuff, I'm just like, I hope that they're buying the art because it's this really cool AI art, and they're not just buying it to sell it for 10% higher or something.
That's so great to hear, August. From the sounds of it, you have a great moral compass all the way from your beginnings of the story about steering away from deep fakes all the way to
Yeah.
releasing the open source code back to the community for them to access. And now you've had the luck and the fortune to come into some decent money and being able to put that back into the community,
Yeah.
supporting artists like yourselves that are upcoming. That's so good. That's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that we are living in an incredible time period right now, and technology has allowed us to do a lot more than we could have dreamed of previously. Such things as GPT-3, AI, such as systems and software power enough for the data crunching. What process do you go through in generating AI art pieces, and how do you go about that process if you were to run somebody maybe who's starting out thinking about
Mate, I love what you're working on. I'd love to start experimenting with some AI art. How would you process that?
Sure. Yes. So pretty much the stuff that I've been doing is pretty much all open sourced. So if you look at something similar to something like StyleGAN, which is an open sourced AI architecture by NVIDIA, and you can find it on GitHub, and there are different approaches you can take. The common approach people will take is to use these pre-trained models that other people have done and go on somewhere like Google Colab, which you can run these cloud computers that aren't super powerful, but are often will have better GPUs than someone's home computer does. And Colab has a free plan that's pretty good. So you can run these pre-trained models and output pieces as a way to just get a feel for playing with it. The way that I do it is a little bit different and a little bit more expensive than that. The way I do it is I don't do any pre-trained models. So I train all my own models. That's part of why what I've really wanted to do, because I've always wanted to do something different. So I wanted to create my own data sets and create my own models. I'm not going to take someone's pre-trained model and try to sell art, because that's someone else trained that and made that data set. It's not mine. I'm just like, but you can still do that for just experimenting with the AI architectures on free Google Colab machines, and not have to pay anything. But the way I do it is I pretty much will do a similar thing, except I'll be running it on AWS cloud computers that aren't free. You can actually quite easily get a lot of credits from Amazon, though. They actually have this Activate Founders program where you can explain your ideas, and they'll pretty easily give you $1,000 in AWS compute credits. And I started with doing that, and that was huge. And then we actually applied through this like startup thing through my school and got $10,000 in credits for Amazon, which is how I was able to fund the training of these models in the first place. Pretty much what I did is I put together my own data sets. And data sets for these sorts of models are just comprised of tons of whatever images you want, right? They could be paintings, they could be photographs, anything like that. All they need to be is all about this, is all the same size and some other technical things. But you pretty much take a data set like that. Normally, I do ones about 10,000 images in the data set, and you can do that by scraping or lots of different ways to download lots of images. You could have someone do that for you, but you pretty much need to put together your own data set of whatever you think will give cool outputs. And then you can send that over to your Amazon cloud computer, and then you can clone the GitHub of something like StyleGAN 2. StyleGAN 3 actually just came out. You can do it on that too. And then you can train these models on that data set. And that's where it's computationally heavy. And that's why you don't do that on a Google Colab machine. You could, but it wouldn't make sense, because Google Colab, even on the Pro plan, only gives you 12 hours at a time on the computer. On a computer that would take maybe 2 weeks or so to train the amount that I train mine, just because it's not as powerful. So the way I do it, I train on this very big machine through Amazon that has 8 GPUs, and each GPU is a NVIDIA Tesla V100. Those each cost like 12 grand a piece. So and there's 8 of them on this cloud computer. So talk about being in a time of crazy tech, right? That's over 100 grand in just GPUs. And I'm able to just access that for $24 an hour through Amazon. So that's huge, because then I can train way faster. So I normally will spend about $2,000 to $3,000 in training for each model. So Alejandro and Taylor are each their own model. Crypto Native is made up of 3 main data sets, and I take snapshots of each of those models at 10 different phases. So it's really 3 main models for Crypto Native. I'm training a new model now. I'm playing with some new stuff. But pretty much that's all you have to do. And you train the model. I'll train it for a couple days on a powerful computer. It's like 24 an hour. So it ends up being $2,000 to $3,000 before I get something that I'm happy with. But you get something that you're happy with much earlier than that. I just have tended to go further so I can have these things like being able to have the pieces evolve, go through different, however long it's been training. All right. But yeah, you can pretty much do that. And then the trick is once you have that model, then that's the model that you could then take onto a collab machine for free and have it output the pieces. The key is that you don't need the really powerful computer to generate the pieces. You just need the powerful computer to train that model. Like I said earlier, people often will do pre-trained models on collab. Once you train your model, you're doing the same thing. You're just not doing the pre-trained model. You're doing your model that you just trained. So then you can upload that to collab and output pieces from it for free. So that's what I do to save money. I train the model. The second I'm done training, I send the model file to my local computer and turn off that Amazon machine so I'm not paying 24 an hour. And then I can take that model onto collab and output the images because I don't need a big computer for that.
So
yeah,
if I'm hearing correctly, is that the model is split into two parts. There is the training part, and then there's the generating part.
Yeah.
And so you use, for your purpose and for speed as well, and time and cost, you would use the AWS model to train all the data sets that you'd feed a custom data set of your own.
Yep.
And then after that, you take that model out, feed it onto Google Colab, and then generate the pieces.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around. I've never had any of it before. So when you're training the data sets, how do you know when it's done? Or
Sure. So things like StyleGAN2 do this cool thing where they'll output sample images every so often, and you can export them, pretty much send them to your local machine to open them up. It'll be a grid of sample outputs. So, and you don't have to stop training to look at that. So you just send it to yourself, open it up on your computer and be like, oh, okay, this looks cool. I'm going to stop the training, or this could be better. I'm going to let it keep training. And so that's how you can just check your progress without having to send the model, generate the pieces every time to check. You don't have to do that. It will make these little sample images for you that you can just look at.
And with the training of the data sets and generating the images from it, is there an algorithm inside that makes sure that it's always unique with each output?
Yeah, I'm not super sure on the super technical details to answer that question, but yeah, I believe so, yes. And each model can output an infinite number of images, which is crazy to even think through. You could pretty much on Colab, you can, once you train it, you can output them on Colab like pretty easily 1 or 2 pieces per second with these models. And the fact to even try to think that you could technically just have that outputting pieces forever is crazy, and have them all be different, like you were saying, because it's pretty much these networks. It's called, like I said, StyleGAN. So the GAN is the specific type of neural network, which is a generative adversarial network that is pretty much playing this game with itself, with this generator and a discriminator, and it pretty much does this little game with itself to try to trick itself into thinking that an output that it made was actually a piece from the original data set, which is funny. And then the discriminator will answer, is this piece from the data set, or is this a piece that the generator created? And at the beginning, it does a good job being knowing the difference, and pretty much the generator is what's changing over time with different weights that are going into everything. And over time, the generator is able to start tricking the discriminator into thinking, oh, this piece is from the data set, even though no, it's not from the data set. It was created. So that's when it gets cool, where you see why it gets better over time, because it just keeps playing this game with itself. So as it keeps going, the generator gets better and better at making pieces that could plausibly have been from the input data set. Is pretty much the way it's doing it.
Gotcha. That is an incredible process that I definitely
Yeah.
and just to explore and have a bit of fun with, right?
Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of an AI/machine learning art, what are your thoughts on the efficacy of these generated materials? If people are thinking, oh, it's AI generated, it's not original, or is you're just copying other people's work and their perspectives of that? What are your opinions on that?
Yeah. These are some of the thoughts that I've thought through a decent amount, and I'm thinking about ethics and things like that. And it all stems down. One of the first things it stems down to is, what is art? And art seems to be defined differently by different people. Different people think different things are art, and that's part of the beauty of art, is that not everyone has to agree on if something looks good. It's subjective. Art is entirely subjective to people. So the cool thing that I think with AI art is, it wouldn't be fair to say it's not art, because if one person says they think it's art, then it is, because that's how anything is with art. The people who code beautiful things might say that piece of code is a piece of art, and no one's place to say that's not true, because it's subjective. It's okay if someone else doesn't think that, but that's what they think. So I think with this AI art, it's all about, what do you think is art? And for the actual things, is it looking at other people's art, right? Is it just copying people? The thing is that I've thought through is, if you're training a model on 10,000 things that are all different, and then you compare it to humans who grow up looking at all these different things, and for example, humans go look at art and they might learn things from that, and that might end up being reflected in their art they actually painted. Unless you're directly making a copy of someone's piece, no one would say you're stealing. It's just you're being inspired by. And if you look at enough pieces of art and you're just inspired by all of them, and you paint something, no one is going to tell you that's not your piece of art. And no one's going to say that the hundreds of artists whose paintings you've ever seen, no one would say that they get any ownership of a painting that you create. And that's my thoughts on AI models, is if you're training them thousands and thousands of pieces of art, there is no copy in there. It is being inspired by all of those in a similar manner to the way a human would be inspired by something, in a similar way that humans learn how to do things, right? Is by seeing others' things. But so that's been the way that I think about it. And people also often ask, is this going to take jobs? Because you can just mass produce tons of this AI art. And like I was saying, you can output these pieces forever just from one model. So I've had the thought, like, okay, if you like go down like a crazy path, like, okay, what if everyone with an AI art model has it output like 10 million pieces and tries to sell all of them? What's going to happen? Okay, that's going to mean the market for AI art is going to be very big, and it's going to be a lot of they're all going to be one of one pieces, and they're all going to be just by these different models, and they're probably not going to be worth anything because there's so many of them. Even though they're one of one pieces, that's going to lose importance. You're going to lose importance with AI art because you can output an infinite number. So one of one in a human sense means they spent a ton of time on this. In the AI sense, it doesn't mean that. It's still one of one, even though it's boom, done, done. It's not the same. So what I think will happen is that isn't going to take anyone's or any artist's jobs, because artists often, actually I'd say always, are creating art because it's something they like to do, and it's something they want to do, and they're trying to get by doing it. And some people are struggling and some people are succeeding more than others, and that's just how it is. But me or anyone, if somebody created of course, the stuff that I'm doing is pretty small scale, so I'm not creating like tons of pieces. But if somebody was trying to sell hundreds of thousands of one AI art pieces, I think that will actually increase the value of every human's art pieces, every normal human artist, because people are drawn to scarcity. And for example, an example given quite a few times is like a super long time ago. If you, before the things of the times of automated manufacturing and mass production, before times of that, if somebody sells you a chair or a piece of furniture, that piece of furniture or chair was made by someone. It was handmade. In that time, those people selling it, I would assume, didn't advertise them as handcrafted because that was a given. They were obviously handcrafted because there was no other option. So that's not any extra value. That's just, yeah, of course it is. Now, if you look at now, if you buy something that says handcrafted, the first thing you think of is like fancy, more expensive, right? Because we live in a time now where it is not a given that it's handcrafted. So the fact that a human spent time, even when the machine could be just like been making a ton of these things, and the human spent time to make it and they did it by hand, it's all perfect. That is now way more valuable than it was a long time ago. So that's the approach that I have thought would be the case, is that, okay, if you saturate the market with a million one AI art pieces, now every human artist should get to advertise handmade, human made, and that'll up the value of it because it's not any more a time when that's obvious, right? Where even not long ago, no one would say a painting is human made. Like, of course it is. So if we get into a time where people are just spitting out like tons of AI pieces, it's just going to make the human ones go up in value, which I think would end up helping anyone trying to their own art. And the only thing we don't want is for people to be trying to pretend to be human when they're not, right? That was something that I've thought through because my first artists have human faces. And I was like, okay, I did that because I think it's a cool conversation starter, not because I'm trying to pretend to have them be human. That's why all over the site it says AI artists. AI artists. I'm not trying to trick people. I'm just trying to be like, whoa, that's crazy. That looks like a person. But I'm not trying to make them actually think it's a person. So I think that's the one thing that I think people need to make sure we don't do, is trying to actually sell art that is like made by a human when it's not, because then you're tricking people and you're like scamming people because it didn't take the same effort to make each piece. It's like, simply put.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your opinion. There's some really great points that you brought up there, and it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of these issues that go through people's minds, and they think about how is it going to turn out, and you answered them perfectly. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
In regard to your current project at the moment, so you went from, and as some of your more recent posts about releasing different phases and the evolution of art. And the first one was the AI generated art from Alejandro and Taylor. And then the next phase with crypto native, which is the morphing images as it goes on the secondary market. Where do you see the uses of the NFT blockchain technology going next in the unique use cases? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different applications for NFTs outside of the like art space also, for things like tickets or methods of identification. There's lots of application there that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about as much because currently everyone's pretty obsessed with these like collectibles, art, but there's a lot more that can be done from a technical standpoint, from not just NFTs, but just more broadly speaking, like blockchain tech in general and stuff with DeFi is where I think really like a lot of craziness is happening. And I think there's going to be more and more people doing more technical things with NFTs compared to just having an NFT that is pretty much just showing you an image. I think that's an awesome start because it's getting so many people into the space, and it got me into the space. It's just getting so many people into the space. And then I think what's going to happen next is people are going to start be like, okay, now that everyone's doing this, we're going to keep thinking through what are new things we can do that are not just showing a singular image on a NFT. And yeah, things that may not be like art and collectible focus, I think is surely going to happen. And it is happening, but it's going to start happening on a broader, like more talked about sense. This feels like DeFi is still not as talked about outside of the space, where NFTs are really have been heard of outside of the space a lot because of people making all of this money and like all these huge sales. People hear about it who aren't in the space, but then DeFi is one of this like thing that's just like sneaking up. That's like super game changing for lots of spaces that people outside of the space, I think, aren't hearing about as much because there's not as much, oh, a piece just sold for $10 million and that's just like everyone's talking.
And could you give us a quick example of something you've seen on the DeFi space of an application or possible use?
Yeah, sure. There's actually a friend of mine who's gotten quite into DeFi, and he's doing crazy things like just things that you really, I'm not an expert on like financial systems and economics, but he's doing things with these interest rates where he's able to take a loan for himself and can be paying, you can sometimes be paying negative interest on the loan you're taking and not have to be taking it from a bank that's going to be charging you a ton and checking it based on your credit. And it just is opening up a lot of access to things that aren't possible to everyday people, like especially things like that. If people, especially people who aren't like accredited investors, normally have to have like over $2 million or have these other things. Okay, that's a huge price of entry to begin with. Not many people have that. So I think the DeFi space is going to help a lot of people who don't have $2 million have access to things that aren't accessible except for people who may be in a much better situation financially than them. So yeah, like my friend I was saying, my friend, he's paying for his school loans he was able to pay off his school loans with loans from DeFi that he's paying way lower interest on it and sometimes negative interest on. So he actually is owing less money over time. Just game changing. It's like just like how does you just like can't even like doesn't even make sense. But he could explain it better than me. But there's some crazy stuff going on in that space. I'm definitely more focused on the NFT space and just the art stuff that I'm doing. But from all the conversations I've had with him, there is crazy stuff going on in the DeFi space.
Something I have to definitely look into. With the success of Mirage Gallery and Crypto Native early on, I guess it is an early success considering it pretty much spanned a year roughly in time frame, and you've pretty much sold out of the Crypto Native pieces. Yep. And you're very young, you're still in college. How has that success changed your trajectory, or has it?
The only thing it's changed for me is giving me a sense of security that I can graduate college and be able to comfortably live for a pretty good period of time and not have to make any money out of college and be able to keep working on my own things. So that's always been something where I've always been working on my own things, but I'm always like in the back of my head, like when I graduate college, like I've been lucky enough that my parents have paid for my college and paid for my housing during college. But of course, when I'm out of college, I got to start doing all that, so I've always in the back of my head, I've always been doing my own things, but I'm like, look, I'm not making enough money to be able to just keep doing these things once I need to pay for everything on my own. So the fact with this success has lifted the kind of thing in the back of my head being like, you're going to have to get a normal job. I can live for a good number of years and be able to just keep working on this or keep working on my own things, or maybe I'll end up switching, doing different things. Who knows? But it's definitely has only changed that like stress that I've always felt. But for my trajectory in any other sense, I don't really think anything has changed. It's also been able to have me be able to give back a ton of money to people, which I really have liked doing. It's something that I also, of course, would not have been able to do before this. So yeah.
Incredible. You're young, you're humble, and you seem like you have your head on straight.
Thank you. Thank you.
And look, we're reaching the tail end, so just a few quick questions and we can wrap up. Are you excited about any upcoming projects coming up in 2022?
Yeah, for the stuff, what I'm getting excited about is this latest project that I've been doing, which is opening up a garage gallery to other artists who are doing stuff with AI. And I want to do like a curated sales of other people's art. I just think that would be fun and be able to bring other people in and have other artists doing cool art. I've positioned this whole thing since the beginning as a gallery, and a gallery traditionally works with many artists. Not, and yeah, you could say I work with me and like Alejandro and Taylor, but it's like it still all comes back to me. So I want to just like keep building it and have other people have art being sold through my gallery, and then there I'd just be like taking a small cut or something to be able to just like sustain that. And so that's definitely what I'm excited for. And I've been focusing a lot on that lately, just with the smart contract side of things, for doing a new contract for doing other people drops. And I've been inspired by our art blocks, which I assume you've heard of. Art blocks is, yeah, they pretty much just do a similar thing, except they're doing all on-chain generative projects. And they're doing generative in a very different sense than my stuff. People don't normally call AI projects generative in the same like sense, even though they still are. But generative, the art block projects, they're all these little simple scripts that have to be able to be stored on chain. My stuff is way too big to have on chain. Even I did the math for putting one of my models on chain on Ethereum, and it would cost 40 Ethereum to deploy it on chain. It would take 3 days for that to deploy, and it would take up 27,000 blocks on the chain. And not only would it cost 40 ETH to put it up, it would cost 40 ETH every time you write to it. So extremely not practical. So things like the stuff that I'm doing, the model itself as of now can't be on chain on Ethereum for sure. But so the stuff I'm doing, I just want to do other AI art projects that with other artists in a similar manner to what Art Blocks is doing, but not at all competing with Art Blocks. Since what I was saying, they're generative on chain, it's totally different.
Understood. So it's essentially a curated marketplace for AI generative art but not on chain. Yeah. As you said, it's just to do that on chain would be
yeah, it would be hard to have the model itself on chain as of now.
yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah, exactly.
With more development on ETH2 and so on. Are there any new beliefs or behaviors that have had a positive impact in your life in recent years?
I think getting into the art space has definitely had a positive impact that I've felt, just with gaining a big appreciation for art. And like I was saying, I bought a piece of art here in my house that is not an NFT artist. It's just a big painting from this artist. And it's something that I probably would have never bought if I didn't start doing stuff with art. If I made some money with some other project that I did that was not art, there's no way I would have spent a bunch of money on a piece of art like at this point in my life. So it's been cool that I've felt like it has had a big positive impact on the way that I like see things, and just like the things that I assign value to, and the ways that I want to give back to people. Yeah.
Right. If you could only send one single line of SMS text to yourself 5 years ago, what would it be?
I'd probably say something at 5. So let's see, that means I would have been in high school still, and I was still doing my own stuff in high school. So I was teaching guitar since I was 12. I actually just stopped teaching guitar this past October because I was finally like too busy and didn't just wanted the time to play guitar. But back then I was definitely still always working on doing my own thing and trying to get my own project started. So I'd probably just tell myself, obviously, if I can't, I assume I can't tell myself start doing AI NFTs, because if I was gotten earlier there, it would be crazy now. But I'd probably just, if it's more just like some motivational texts, I would probably just say grinding and keep doing the projects and you'll get there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Your hard work paid off in your stories.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
And finally, how could people reach out or learn more about you?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at August FR. You can go to the Mirage Gallery site, which is miragegallery.ai. You can actually go .com also. It'll go to the same place. But I'm pretty active on Twitter, so that's the best place to contact me. I'm on Instagram, but I don't post very often, and so it's mainly Twitter's is the place that I'm engaging with people in this space. So yeah, definitely can find me there.
Great. Thank you so much, August, for all your time and
Yeah, for sure.
the amazing stories you shared. You dropped lots of knowledge bombs as well. There's a lot to digest, definitely.
Yeah, I know.
I want to wish you all the best on your future endeavors, and I hope the marketplace goes off once you drop that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
For sure.
Right.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the links to the show notes will be available at kevinleesocial.com, spelled KEVINLY. Conversely, if you have any interviews that you'd love to recommend, please send it over to kevinleesocial@gmail.com. I'd love to connect. Thank you. Until the next episode.